Welcome to Smart Women Talk. This is your host, Katana Abbott. I'm a midlife millionaire coach and a certified financial planner, and I search the world for smart women and a few good men, including best-selling authors and thought leaders who are on that leading edge. So join us for conversations on money, business, health, and inspiration so you can live with more purpose, passion, and prosperity. Hello, everyone. This is Katana Abbott, and I want to welcome you to Smart Women Talk. With so many of us all around the world who are facing challenges, whether it's like the recent hurricane in Florida that so many have been devastated by, including Puerto Rico and other places in the world, whether it's the stock market, the inflation, all of us are facing challenges and we still have to move forward in our lives. And so with our theme being finishing the year, reaching your goals this year, I thought, who else could I bring back to this show but 9/11 survivor, Mike Jaffe. He was on the show 10 years ago, and it was on the 11-year anniversary of 9/11. I just had to bring him back again, and he graciously agreed to come back. Mike is known as the human wake-up call, and in a few minutes when you meet him, you're going to know why. So regardless of what is going on in your life, we all must move forward, face those challenges that are ahead of us. And today, Mike is going to be sharing not only his personal story, but how he found the gift and some tools that he's using now to inspire others. So we're going to be sharing with you how to create a wake-up call for yourself on demand. 5 principles for waking up and living powerfully starting today, and how to face the challenges that are before you with confidence. So let me tell you a little bit about Mike. He's the president and founder of SAVIA Leadership, a global leadership development firm that unlocks the potential of individuals and teams through conscious communication, experiential learning, and transformational conversations. He approaches every relationship as a trusted partner. He's committed to building a culture of leadership in organizations. He is also a recognized international speaker. He's an executive coach and a best-selling author. He has been featured on all the shows, CNN, Fox News, and he's been published and quoted in the Wall Street Journal, MSN, CNBC, U.S. News and World Report, and Crain's Business, Entrepreneurial Magazine, Radio, and that's just to name a few. So, Mike, thanks so much for being on Smart Women Talk today. We got a little chance to talk before we started the show. I'm so excited to have you back. It's so much has changed in this last 10 years.
Oh, yeah, it's so nice to be here. It's so nice to see you again, Katana. Thank you very much for inviting me here. Absolutely.
So, it's been 20 years since that fateful day. Actually, 21 years, I think. Yeah, 21 years. So, and you wrote this book, Wake Up, Your Life is Calling. I would love for you to share that story with our listeners of that morning, because I want you to share that story about the commitment that you had made and the choice you had. I mean, it's so inspiring. Can you just tell us a little bit? Take us back to that day. What was going on and what happened that morning of 9/11 in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So actually that morning started the day before, and as many things do. And for me, the day before was a very common day, looked like any other day. I was unhappy in my job, not because of the company. It was a great company, but I was choosing what I ultimately realized just to be unhappy. And my commute was 2 hours each way. So it was 4 hours a day commuting. Now in this world of remote work, that probably seems insane, but I can tell you the trains were all full back then. And what was really happening, you can spend a lot of time just getting sucked into that without even realizing how much time is passing until you have some kind of moment that just gives you a little bit of a wake up. And so for me, it was my daughter, my 1-year-old daughter. And I realized that I would leave every morning for work. She'd be sleeping. I'd come home at night. She'd be sleeping. She was only 1. I wanted that time with her, and I was really missing it. And I was I was just being very resentful about it without doing anything about it. And so me being resentful, I was actually letting that energy spill over my family, my relationships, my work. So everything was really a little bit negative at the time until the day before. I went outside. It was a beautiful day, and something clicked in my brain, and it was that I had to own it. It was time to stop blaming everyone and everything for what was essentially my choices. And just that one switch of accountability, and that's where it starts. It has to start with perspective, accountability, ownership. That started to change everything. So then I was left with, okay, what can I do? And I looked around. I wasn't going to move. We had just moved a few months earlier. So that big change really wasn't something I wanted to take on. I could have chosen it, but it was more than I wanted to take on. I wasn't going to change work. I'd only been there a few months. It was a recession. I was actually very lucky to have that role. So really, where do you start? And I just looked at what my core values were, and what was missing for me was time with my family. And I looked at my calendar and I said, you know what, tomorrow I don't have any early meetings. So why don't I just take a train that's just one train later and I have breakfast with them? And it's such a small little thing. Will that even count? And so I started to minimize the impact and the value of doing such a small thing. But yet I felt like something that was an important step to take, because that was something I actually had control over, that I could choose to create for myself. I didn't need anybody else's permission, and I didn't need anybody else to have any contribution to that. That was something I owned fully. And so I made that decision, and I let my wife know. She was appropriately happy, just, we're going to have breakfast tomorrow. And I went back to my office that afternoon, and here's what was really interesting, Katana, like everything changed. So the work, my job, my role, none of that changed, but my relationship to everything had shifted because I had taken control back. And I had the best afternoon I had had since I started that job for months. Next morning, I get up at my normal time. We have these ingrained habits that become very powerful. There's a lot of current flowing in that river of every day. And I had my suit on. We wore suits back then. And my wife came out and she said, "Oh, you're ready to go to work? I thought we were going to have breakfast. What do you want to do?" And one of the lessons is, we decide to do things. We choose to do things. And then our busy day-to-day shows up. And it's very easy to say, no, that was a good idea, but let me just do what I always do. And I was struggling with that. I had that little tug of war in my head. Oh, go to work, don't go to work. Have breakfast, don't have breakfast. Go, just go on your way. And you ever have that tug of war
yes.
going on? I bet you. Yeah, right. It gets very loud in there.
Everybody's resonating with that, right?
Completely.
Like it's just such a little thing. One day, right?
One day. And it doesn't mean that every little thing is going to have a huge impact. What it does mean, though, is that you're making choices that are aligned with your values, and then you're having integrity with that by actually turning those intentions into actions. So even little tiny steps have a lot of power because you're choosing to do something, not just think about something, not just decide something, but actually take an action step that's aligned with that. And that's very, very powerful. And you don't have to take a huge bite. You can take little bites. If you keep taking those steps, it's going to add up to big change. And so for me, that was the first little bite. And we had a nice little breakfast. And I remember getting into the train on that Tuesday morning, and I felt terrific. I felt better than I had in a long time. And I was in the train, and because we had that breakfast, I was still in the subway when the first plane landed into the World Trade Center and actually hit my desk, hit my floor, because my floor was the point of impact of the first plane. I had worked in the North Tower of the World Trade Center, and that morning happened to be 9/11.
Oh my gosh. So when you think back at that, it has to always still have the same impact, doesn't it?
It does, and I want it to. I never want it to just be a story, and sometimes I hear the words and I don't always feel it, and that upsets me more. I want to feel it, and it's okay to. It takes a lot more courage to be authentic with how you feel than to pretend you're not feeling anything or to get numb. And so when I share that with audiences, everybody goes to their place.
Yeah.
And you can feel the silence in the room as everybody is wherever they are emotionally and with memories. And even people that are younger still feel that was a traumatic and very significant event. And that's okay. You have to have permission to feel, to go where you go. Just don't always let that choose your action.
Right, right. I was sharing with we had company, and I was sharing last night with our friends that I was interviewing you today. Right away, all three of them said, "I remember where I was that very moment." All of us were able to remember that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that was such a pivotal moment for those of us that were there and lived through that, and it had that kind of impact. And even since then, there are constantly storms that are happening. Like you said, whether it was the hurricane this past weekend or some other event that happened in schools or with the economy or in politics, everybody has their own opinions about those. People are going through a lot of stress and a lot of storms, and that's human. That's never going to change. So it's really about learning how to navigate those storms. That's going to allow you to stay empowered in your life.
Yeah, navigating the storms. That's amazing. So let's finish. So you're on the subway, and that was 20 years ago. So what was happening? I mean, did everyone have cell phones and they all knew exactly what was going on? Where I'm going
It
with
was 2001. Even the internet was relatively young, and
Yeah.
cell phones, there were a lot more Blackberries back then, actually.
Okay.
And they were flip phones, and so, very early days. And what happened was, I was on the subway, and we were supposed to get off at the main stop where you'd go to the World Trade Center, which was Fulton Street. Over the loudspeaker, they said, "Police activity at Fulton Street. We're going down to Wall Street," which is the next stop. Okay, that happened quite a bit. It was not alarming. It was not a big deal. So I got up. I'm standing in the vestibule. The doors open. Now, normally in New York, rush hour, even in the morning rush hour, is a full contact sport, right? The platforms are full. You're coming on, they're coming off, and everybody's kind of bumping and bruising their way through that thing. There was nobody on the platform. There was just nobody there. And that registered to me as odd. What's going on here? That's a little strange. And then as I walked up the subway stairs, I started to hear the noise, and you started to hear it getting louder and louder and louder until I came out onto the street, and it was just chaos. There was just so many people out there that I was just a little stunned. I had no idea what was going on. And I turned to somebody on the street and I said, "What's going on?" And they said, "Oh, you mean besides the plane crash?" And I thought, wow, there was a plane crash. That's crazy. How interesting. I wonder what happened, and what I had no concept or couldn't even imagine what it actually was. I thought maybe there was a small plane or something like that. And because of where you are on Broadway as you're walking up, you can't see the World Trade Center yet, or you couldn't at the time, till you get to the corner. And so I'm walking, and then I finally get to the corner, and I look up, and there's a big hole in the tower, and I start counting down from the top, because when you work up that high, it was 110 stories high. People can probably hardly imagine how high that really is when you're standing there. 110-story building, it's insane. And you start counting down, and I said, "Wow, that's my floor. What can I do?" And I froze. And now my head is thinking, all right, do I try to help? Do I go there? Do I not go there? And I was kind of teetering back and forth when all of a sudden the first responders broke my spell, and they said, "Hey, we're clearing out this area. Let's let the fire officers in there, firemen, etc., EMTs." So I thought, you know what? The best thing I could do right here is to get out of the way so they can do their job. And I moved out of the way. I didn't have my phone, actually. I did have a cell phone at the time, but I had left it up there because I was so excited to have breakfast. I didn't even bring my phone home. It wouldn't have worked anyway. It wouldn't have
Yeah.
worked anyway. Because all the communications were in the towers. They were all cut off. And so now it became about letting my family know, hey, you know what? I'm okay. Now at this time, it was just after 9, just after the second plane hit, still trying to sort through what was going on. A lot of confusion, a lot of chaos. Couldn't fathom that the towers were going to come down. So it didn't feel unsafe there, other than debris and other things. People, a lot of sadness happening there. Had to find my way out of there. The lines for the payphones were incredibly long because that was the only way that people could communicate with someone else. And I found myself just in a little area where it was all cobblestone streets, just wandering, trying to find a way out of there. I knew the area pretty well. And all of a sudden I found myself at a payphone that had 25 cents for 3 local minutes. And I said, well, I don't have a quarter on me. And I felt down and I had a quarter in my pocket. It's just one of those strange things that I'm not trying to say it's anything other than I did not think I had a quarter, and there was a quarter in my pocket, and I put it in there, and I called my friend and I said, hey, call my wife, call my parents, let them know I'm okay. I'm going to head up to your office, or I'm going to try to get out of here. And I got to the subway that was still running. There was a subway that ended, it's the 6 train, and it ended there in that area, and it went uptown, and that was still running. And I'll never forget going back into the subway car, and the doors closed and it got quiet because it was so loud, sirens, and I mean, just the din that was going on there, and it just got quiet. And there was a scattering of people, and we all looked at each other, and without having to say a word, we were all saying, yo, you okay? I got your back. I got your back. It was so powerful. Communication, even without words, can be so powerful. And it was a moment where you really felt connected to the people around you, even with the anger, even with the fear. There was still a connection there, and we talk about what is the gift of the storm, or how do you navigate these things? That's one of them. Is that we always have that choice. And in that moment, coming out of the devastation, there was a community that came together that I don't know if it's still been as strong as it was in those days and weeks and months after that, terrible tragedy.
My husband and I took our children. We had plans to go to Disney World, for a year, and we had our tickets bought, and we thought, should we go? It was right afterwards. And I said, should we go? And we said, yes, let's go. And there was no lines. The kids were able to go on their rides, and every night we went to Epcot Center and had dinner in a different country. I'm getting emotional here. And
yeah, that's okay.
And then at the end of my girls were little, they're 30 now. So we would go to a different country, and then every night, and then we would come out to the middle where the water was, and that planet, the Earth was there, and they would, I don't think they did fireworks, but they did this light show, and then there was music, and everyone there held hands and sang together.
Yeah.
Every night. It was really amazing. It was really amazing. So I have to ask you, when those doors shut, and, was that your wake up call the day that happened?
No, it was not. I was stunned. It was surreal. I think I was in shock. And it wasn't until after that I started to have to pick myself up and rebuild, and I had to go back to the city and face all the fear and terror I felt there, because everything felt like it was vulnerable. And my wife and I went back to the city, and we volunteered at the Family Assistance Center for our company, and tried to help out and contribute wherever we could. It wasn't until a few years later that I defined my wake-up call as surviving and coming out and coming through, and the resilience and the strength of 9/11. But you know what, kind of what I realized, and what really evolved after that, which is what I've been sharing for the last 12 or 15 years in my talks and all the work that we do, is that really my wake-up call happened on September 10th, because that's when I realized that I was not living life. I was not choosing or making choices that were aligned with my values, with what I really wanted. And I wasn't owning it. I was blaming everyone else. There were a lot of excuses. There were a lot of things that I was doing to not be accountable for my life. And when I made that choice to have breakfast with my family, that was my wake-up call, because that was a day that looked like any other day. And that's really the message. That's a more powerful message, because this is the message for everybody, that you don't have to wait for bad news from the doctor. You don't have to wait for a near miss. You don't have to wait for tragedy or pain or loss or any of that stuff to wake up. A lot of times we're waiting for this external stimulus to hit us and say, hey, it's time to wake up. Well, you don't have to wait for that. You just need to choose it. And that's the wake-up call, right? That was a day that looked like any other day. That was a Monday morning. And it's all about getting really back in touch with what's most important to you, and making a decision to take a small step that's in alignment with those values. And then when it comes to it, following through, turning that intention into action, even if it's a tiny little bite, that's the wake up call. And that's something that everyone can do starting right now, just because they choose to. They don't need anyone's permission and they don't need anything to happen. They just need to choose it.
So, and you've actually got 5 steps, don't you, to help all of us who are, watching or listening, 5 simple steps that we can take. And is it an acronym?
Yeah, it's the 5 Ps.
Okay.
I have it in the book.
So,
It's basically what's a roadmap? How do you get started when you feel so busy and so full and it feels very, very overwhelming? How do you actually start to move forward in your life? Well, there are a lot of components there, and everyone's starting from a different place. The first P, the first step is perspective. It's all about perspective. And within perspective, that's a lot of mindset. It's that you have the power to do this, that you don't want to settle for what I call fine. Fine is a 4-letter word. If things are fine, what's going on there? Is it that you just came out of where things were really not fine and this is a place to catch your breath? That's okay. But if we're getting stuck there, there's too much inertia in fine and we stop to strive for more than fine. And that's the kind of thing at the end, when we're looking back on our life later, we're like, oh, that's the stuff I should have done. Those are the regrets we have. Don't accept fine, strive for more than fine. And when you think about that, what happens? Well, then we start to get nervous. We start to get unknown. The fears show up, the tensions. Well, those are all based on assumptions. Those are all based on things that are showing up in our head, all that noise. And it doesn't mean it's the truth. So our perspective and our perception of what the truth is really only a slice of reality. And it's not all that's possible. There's so much more possible than you think. And so the mindset is to believe in the possibility of the future aligned with your core values. So perspective is the first key, and it all starts with awareness. There are times when I'm driving and I'm an ex-New Yorker, I'm an expat New Yorker, and I'm living up in the beautiful mountains of Western Massachusetts and very friendly and nice there. And when I'm driving back to the city, all of a sudden, everybody speeds up. People are passing me on the left and the right. They're cutting me off. Well, they're not cutting me off. They're driving. That's the way they drive. But I make it personal. They're cutting me off. And I start getting tense and I'm holding my hands. And then I look in the rearview mirror and I see angry Mike up there. And I'm like, what am I doing? Without that perspective, without awareness, I have no access. So everything starts with awareness. And so we want to really take a look at our life authentically, honestly. Where are we living in alignment and out of alignment with what's important to us? From perspective, then we need to have purpose. So then we need to know, why are we going to move forward? You see this bridge that I'm sitting on here. This is what I call, the bridge of change. It's not easy to take on change. So a lot of times the concept or the metaphor of change is we're here and we want to get over there, and all that's connecting us is this rickety bridge with these wooden planks, and it's moving in the wind. It feels really terrifying and intimidating. And so if somebody was going to push you on there, which is like when you're waiting for bad news, there's a push. Well, as soon as somebody pushes, what happens? We resist. Think about 2 hands on your back, pushing you forward. We're going to resist. Push is not enough. We need a pull. And so purpose is our pull. What's our why? And I know you talk a lot about that. What is going to get me across this bridge? What is on the other side that's so important to me, that's not negotiable to me, that it's going to give me the courage to continue to take those steps, even though it feels scary, right? So we need to have purpose. Then once we have purpose and we kind of have a sense of where we want to get to, it's not time to plan yet. It's time to play. Play is a really, really important step, because as one of my mentors always said, to know without doing is not to know. So we think we have a path. We think we know what we want. But if we plan, then when we get there, it may not be what we expect. Right. So let's take a bite. Let's play with it. Let's see. And when you're playing, you're able to experience things without the pressure that we have to reach a certain level. It's like starting anything new. Don't judge yourself. Don't hold yourself to some unfair level of perfection the first time you try something, right? Just play. Maybe the 40th time. Now you should be getting better, right? If you're not getting better by 40 times, maybe you rethink that a little bit. But give yourself some runway to really learn and get the context and understand this and see, is this really the path I want? And after you've played and you clarify, then you can plan
Yeah.
on how to get there. Then it's the how. We get so stuck by the how because we don't know how. We feel it's not possible.
So play is also where you're testing and making mistakes, right? And learning, because
Completely.
that's when we get our greatest lessons is from our mistakes.
Absolutely. Exactly. And you need to give yourself permission to make mistakes. And if you're planning and you're already need to be there, we need to be kind to ourselves. We are very tough on ourselves, and we don't allow ourselves, that ability to learn and grow, because everything is kind of an instant gratification world that we live in. And we just don't allow ourselves the ability to make mistakes, grow, learn without feeling judged or judging ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes really, really, I guess, suppressing. And that's where we settle for fine. You know what? I'm
Right.
fine. I don't need to go there. I'm fine. Yeah. And that becomes our mindset. And that's what's so dangerous. I'm going to say dangerous there. So after we plan, now we have a plan to get there. We don't have to know exactly how to get there. We need to know how to get from doorway number 1 to doorway number 2, even though we want to get to doorway number 6. So the 5th P is persist. What do you need to do to keep taking those steps every single day? And courage is one of those steps. So it's perspective, purpose, play, plan, persist.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so often people will give up right before they have success. We've heard of this over and over and over. I mean, has that happened to you where you've thought I'm just going to give up, and then somehow you didn't, and then you found out, oh my gosh, I was so close? And I mean, you hear this all the time, right? This idea of persisting until the end. And too often that, sometimes it's the most difficult too, before you reach that goal. And it's so easy to just, I'm just not going to do this.
It's so easy to do that. It's so noisy. Success is messy, and we like it clean and linear. We want just a very straight line path to get there, and the fastest way that we can. And so if you're finding yourself wanting to give up or not get there, well, you have to really take a look at what does it mean for you to succeed? What is the why? What was the original purpose of you going there? And then what are the assumptions that you're making that are now obstacles, that are now in your way? What is that resistance that you're feeling? And are you making it the truth as a way to not pursue? Or does it really feel like an obstacle? Well, even if it does, there are ways to reframe it so that you can stay in motion. This even happens with little things. I was on the bike this morning and I had 6 minutes left on the bike ride. And I'm like, all right, that's enough. And no, don't keep going, finish, succeed. Well, it's enough time. I want to get ready. There's so much noise going on, even just in a little morning workout, and so we want to build those muscles where we finish, where we have integrity with our word, where we do what we say we're going to do. And if it's too much, then stop committing so big. Take a smaller bite and have complete integrity with that bite, and build from success instead of having, ambitious failure all the time.
There was another thing that I really loved that you shared in the book. I'd like you to talk about it. You call it the ABCs of living powerfully. Can you share that tool as well? Because in the name of your book is
Wake Up Your Life is Calling. And then the subline is, why settle for fine when so much more is possible?
Yeah. So again, fine is where you're just settling. And I remember there was another part you said, if you're in fine, there's something that can happen. You have, what is it? Inspiration. And
that's right. So the way that works is when life is rough and you're living life at like a 2 or a 3 out of 10, you're feeling the pain there. And sometimes we wait for things to get so bad to activate us to say, all right, I've had enough. I have to do something about this, right? Have you ever let something get bad enough to finally say, all right, it's time?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Maybe it's eating or working out or a relationship, that gets toxic enough that you finally have the courage to stop it or walk away from it. But all of that time until that happens, we're living in that world of fine. So when you're down there in desperation, you're going to be in action. Now, when life is really powerful and momentum is happening and you're living at an 8 or a 9 and all kinds of good things are happening, you're in action because that's inspiration. So there's desperation, there's inspiration. When you're living in that middle, 5, 5.5, 6, where things aren't bad enough, things aren't definitely not good enough, that's stagnation. And that's the realm of fine.
Okay.
right? Because what if I try and I end up down there? Well, if you try for something and you end up down there, you're going to be in action about it. Don't settle for fine. That's an excuse. Get really clear on what you want and take a small step. This doesn't mean you have to disrupt your entire life. It means you need to be aware of the costs of not doing something and then take small steps towards getting aligned with your life, even when it feels like it's out of reach. There's definitely a path to get there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. I think this is a great thing to share now, these ABCs of living powerfully, because this has to do, doesn't it, with our values too?
Yeah, it does. So this is the tool. This is the practical tool.
Okay.
And really what's important is with all these conceptual models and conversations, you need to have something practical that's going to actually give you a way to take action in your life. So ABC tool is really a way to kind of clear the noise so that you can move forward. The first thing is awareness. Without awareness, you have no access. So just like angry Mike driving, it's almost unconscious until all of a sudden I see myself and I'm like, okay, that's right. But I'm still in a state that's very tense, that I'm in an emotional state. I don't necessarily have control of everything. So I need a way to kind of create some space with the emotion that I'm feeling so that I can kind of take control back. And that's breath. And so A is awareness, B is breath. Breathe in through your nose. And I know there's a lot of work about breath, but the key for this one, the B, is at the top of your breath, you say a mantra, something that's going to be almost like a little self-coaching. You got this, or relax, or, keep moving on. For me, it's let go, because I tend to get really tense when I'm starting to stress up. So let go. It allows me to kind of find my way back to center. And then at the end of the breath, and this is the key, you have to smile. And you're not going to want to smile because you're in an emotional state. And so the smile creates that chemical reaction in your brain, whether it's a forced smile or a real smile, it still creates that reaction. And it's that smile and that serotonin that flows. That is what's going to get you in a calmer, more positive state. Well, now that you're standing in space, so you've been able to move away from that emotional state into kind of space. Now, how do you want to generate yourself? Who do you want to be now going forward? And that's where your values show up. See its core values. Who are you? And if you can figure out what are those core values, and a lot of times the way you can do that is look at people you admire in your life, or even characters from shows. What is it about them that you admire? And if you can see a character in them or a character trait in them, it means you have a little bit of that in yourself. So you may not have it as developed as them, but it's in there. And so for me, it's love, leadership, authenticity, and courage. Those are my four. I carry those around with me all the time. I'm not always living by those. And that's when I have to have awareness that I'm not. Breathe. You got this. Let go, whatever your mantra is. Smile. And now say, if I was going to bring love or leadership or courage or authenticity to this situation, what would that look like? Who would I be? And then that allows me to live my life by being my values. Those become the pillars that you live your life through. And it's a constant cycle. It's never a one and done. It's always about generating yourself as your values, and those muscles get stronger. It does get easier. So if it's a little bit challenging at first, that's okay. Again, be kind to yourself and just keep going through the process. Awareness, breath, core values, and create yourself. And that's where you take action from who you want to be, not from your reactive self, but from your responsive self. That's the difference between reacting and responding. Mm-hmm. It's being thoughtful.
And it's so important to tie our values to our goals, because I remember years and years ago, I realized something that someone would say, I definitely want to save for college for my kids. But if that goal was not aligned with their values, and their values were they need to shiny object, buy things, have the best of everything, it's going to get pushed to the side. And so this idea of really understanding your values is so important. I remember you sharing something where your core values actually helped you change your work situation. So your drive, I don't know if you remember sharing.
Yeah, my commute.
Your commute that was just, I don't say killing you. I hate saying stuff like that. But the commute that was not aligned with your values, how you were able to shift that. And it was really something that was impossible. Everyone said, oh, you can't do that. But somehow you danced with the universe and you gave value, right? But But tell us a little bit about that. And we're at the top of the hour. I think it's a wonderful way to share the story with, real experience. I just would love for you to share that story.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. So real story. So everything I
Yes.
share is real story. So Mike, coming out of 9/11, I still worked in that company, and they did a wonderful job navigating through that whole thing. I just have nothing but praise for them. And my commute was still 2 hours each way. And so I was still commuting 4 hours, and there was a sales office that was about 15 to 20 minutes from my house. And but I couldn't be based out of that because I had a corporate role, and that was much more of a regional sales office. And so it's never happened that a corporate person was going to be able to be based there, because if I could work out of that office, now my commute goes to 20 minutes instead of 2 hours. That is a life changer.
Mhm.
So I was committed that I was going to figure out a way to make this work, but everybody told me, nope, it's never been done. They have to pay for your desk in your office. You don't add any value to them. You're not in sales. There's never going to happen. So I tucked that away. And I also realized that it wasn't about entitlement. I wasn't entitled to work from there just because I lived near there. That's not the equation. It's about value. Everything is about value exchange. And so I had to figure out, what is the value equation that I can create that's going to make that possible for me, regardless of whether it was never possible for anyone else before. So I had to figure out a way that I could add value to that sales office so that they can consider, hey, he's pretty valuable. Maybe we'll sponsor him to work from here. Well, it took a year, or maybe even a little longer. I was in charge of doing I ran the field marketing team. And what we did was we helped to train the sales reps in all of the technology tools that the company had. And so I took on going to that office and really developing relationships there, and asking to see if they wanted to be a pilot for new tools as we developed them, if I could use them as a pilot office, and their salespeople would have first crack at these, they would have input on these, and they thought it was a great idea. And so over time, I was actually able to make the case that it would probably be best if I was based out of here, so I didn't have to keep commuting back and forth from New York. And finally, they said, you know what, that's a great idea. Let's do that. And I was the first person to be based out of that sales office that was not in sales. And it took time. And again, it was not based on entitlement. It was based on value.
Yeah.
And so you have to figure out what is that value exchange that's going to create a new possibility for you, and then pursue it like anything.
And that's just such a great story. And, I know people listening and watching are thinking now of, hey, I've been able to do that in the past, or this could work for me. So that is just such a great way to end this. I want you to share what you're doing. You mentioned you're no longer with the same company. You have your own company, and you're living, it sounds like, your dream life and your dream home, right? It sounds like in the country, and working, you can work virtually, but also now with COVID opening up, you're probably traveling all over again. And tell us a little bit about that and how people can reach you.
Yeah, thanks, Katana. I've had my own company for a while, but it's gone through some iterations, and now it's really in a nice place. We have a great team that works with us. We have an amazing roster of experts that we bring into projects based on what the needs are all over the world, actually. And so I do a lot of keynote speaking. And as you mentioned, that's starting to open up again. And I was in front of a group last week, and it was just so good to share that energy in that space, and inspire people, and just feel that, that whole human to human connection. There's great convenience in working remotely, and there are a lot of benefits to it. There's nothing that replaces human to human connection. And so even if you are virtual or remote, it's so important to get back together, at least at some cadence, with people. And so we help to make that happen. So part of our company is we'll either come to you to work at corporate retreats or team development or team sessions or strategic planning, whatever, or we'll bring you up to us. And we're in Western Massachusetts in a beautiful place called the Berkshires. So Berkshire Corporate Retreats is part of our business. And so we bring teams up here to have that combination of learning and team building and just play, fun activity, so that they can really bond as people, which builds the trust that you need. So when you go back to working remotely or not seeing each other, you still have that bridge of trust that connects everybody. It's so easy to lose that and just kind of have your head down and be busy without playing for each other. You're just playing for your own area. And so that connection really, really important. So we do executive coaching and And again, topical training, manager training, leadership development, all of those things.
Fantastic. And how do we reach you?
The overall best place to go is our website, humanwakeupcall.com. And the name of our company is SAVIA, SAVIA Leadership. And if you go to social media and you look up myself, or if you look up SAVIA Leadership or Human Wake Up Call, you'll find us up there.
Fantastic. And I know you have a book available. People can get it anywhere. They can get it anywhere. And on your website.
They can get anywhere. Yeah, if you go to wakeupbook.com, that's a shortcut to it, wakeupbook.com. We'll get you there, but it's certainly on Amazon as well.
Yeah. And do you still have that chapter available, a sample chapter?
We should. I'll take a look now that we're talking about it. I haven't been on that page for a while, so I have to make sure that none of the links are broken. So we'll go back there and
I checked it out. It's working.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yes.
I was just asking.
It's absolutely there. It's
pretty exciting. Yeah. And you've got great exercises. So a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, it's all in the book, just great stuff. It's classic. So again, Mike, thank you. Thank you so much for being here. It's been such a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for being part of our community. And if you want to get on our list, go to joinsmartwomen.com. That's a quick little URL you can go to. You'll know who our guests are coming up every time. Great articles and links and any kind of programs they're doing. We have all kinds of stuff that you can do. So until our next show, go out and live with more purpose, passion, and prosperity. Smart Women Talk is brought to you by Smart Women's Empowerment, a 501c3 nonprofit project of United Charitable. Music by Bill Lucas from his album, When It Rains. Available on Apple Music and Spotify. Catch us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, and be sure to join our free community at joinsmartwomen.com to access all our free Smart Women resources.